Good day, everyone, and welcome to a tough episode of the IELTS Plus English podcast, where we will be talking about rules and law. So I think this could be a tough one. I haven't seen any of the questions yet, but the reason I say that is, of course, when you think of law, you're kind of thinking of your country's law, and do I know this area? It seems a bit of a daunting subject. I would just say, though, as soon as I see this, I think about, as we talked about before, bringing it into my own world. And probably, I imagine today, that's what I'm going to be doing, talking about just rules and law of my community or maybe my sport or something like that. So we'll see how the questions are, but very important to bring it into your own world and don't get too bogged down with things you don't know, your country's constitution or something like that. We can try to keep it in an area of comfort. So I'm not going to answer any student questions today. I will be doing that next time, but you do have a student challenge, and that's very simple. Have you ever broken a law or rule? Have you ever broken a law or rule? That's going to be probably one of my questions today. But again, keep it fairly simple. Doesn't have to be a law, it can be just a little rule that there is in the household. So please let me know in the comments. As I always say, YouTube comments, but go ahead with your comments on your podcast platforms such as Spotify, because I do check those as well. Coming to the language for today, although it's very topic specific, it's not crazy, it's not too hard. I see here obey, illegal, justice. I think these are words that we can definitely get into our answers today, and they're not too, as I said, it's not too daunting. And those words are available in my textbook, which is on www.britplus.net, and you can download it there, and that will help you in your preparation for your exam. So let's get started. Let's do it. Question one, part one, question one. Have you ever broken a rule or law? Yes, I must have done many times during my life, but I think the rule that I broke that comes to my mind is in school. And at that time, sometimes in high school, when I was kind of 17 or 18 years old, I skipped a class. It was relatively easy to do. I came to school for registration, and then I left sometime kind of late morning or early afternoon, and no one really checked. It is against the rules, of course. You must attend your classes, but that's what I did. Good. Maybe today I'm going to sound a little bit naughty, hopefully not too bad, but that's the first rule I will talk about. The next question is, what are some common rules in your home or workplace? My workplace is here and I work alone, so there's I suppose I could talk about the rules that I have for students. I'm an English teacher and I have students, and in order to maintain business in a good manner, there are rules. For example, if you want to cancel or change your class, you must tell me 24 hours in advance. Not a big deal, but if you come into my office, there are slippers laid out, and the rule is, please take off your shoes and put on slippers to keep the academy clean. There are a number of other little rules, it's not too strict here, but these things allow me to run a clean and fair business. Let's move on to part two. Now, today's part two is describe a situation where you saw someone breaking a rule or law. Good. I did expect it to be, tell me about a time you broke a rule or law. And then part two, I'd have to get quite deep into a rule or law that I broke. However, we're talking about witnessing today. So let's give that a go. 2 minutes on the clock. My time starts now. I'd like to tell you about my experience in Spain. I went to Spain about 8 years ago, and when I was in Madrid, I spent a few days in Madrid. I was a witness to a crime in one of these kind of squares in the middle of Madrid. There was a restaurant, there were several restaurants, and a lot of seating was outside in the courtyard. Lovely, really beautiful place. The problem was a woman in this case put her handbag on the back of her seat, just hanging, which made it very tempting for pickpockets. So a person came up behind her, snatched the handbag, and ran through the courtyard. And he was off. I think some people pursued him. There were some pursuers, but in my memory, he got away, and I don't think he received any justice. I think he actually got away with the handbag, and that was it. The woman lost it. I don't know beyond that. Of course, there could be CCTV footage and there could be evidence, but yeah, that's what I saw. So let me tell you a little more about this case. Basically, as I explained, she's sitting down, he took her handbag, and it was just very easy for him to run out of this square. And even though there were some policemen there, it was so hard to enforce the law because it's so open and there's other people there. It was just, they weren't able to catch him. As I said, perhaps there's CCTV footage. I'm not sure. I don't know what it's like there in Seoul, and I know London, there's so much CCTV, so it's very easy to bring justice. Okay, there you go. That was tricky because although I was happy with my choice, I quickly realized around halfway through that it's a really simple story. It would be difficult to really focus on that for 2 minutes. Obviously, I could have progressed with my structure more. In this case, I kind of diverted it to CCTV and talking about Seoul and London. So that's what you can do as well. All I want, and that's not easy to do, I know, during an answer to just on the spot switch to other topics. But I would say, do try to do that because the goal is reaching 2 minutes. Don't do a minute and a half and stop. We really want to hit that 2 minutes. So there you go. Let's go to some part threes. How do laws affect our daily lives? Well, there's a lot of regulations and laws that we have to follow in our daily lives. I could talk about a number of rules that there are in the city, laws that we have to follow. I think perhaps the interesting area is on the road. So obviously we mustn't drink and drive. We must stay within a speed limit, and there are a variety of rules that we must obey on the road. Not only laws, but just the unspoken rules in society of, okay, don't cut in and don't drive aggressively, that you just hope that other people follow so that you can drive smoothly and safely. I think nowadays in Korea, the penalties for breaking laws while driving, such as drink driving, have become much more severe. That, by the way, just quickly, that answer was really good because I talked about quite a few things. I included some of the specific vocabulary today. That was great, but also it was a nice case of some details and a specific example, Korea. So do try to follow that if you can. Next question. Do you think it is ever acceptable to break the law? Yes, it must be. There must be cases where it's acceptable to break the law. For example, if someone's in trouble, they're in danger of being injured or of death, we must be able to break the law in order to save them, rescue them, whatever the situation is. you see in cases where there's severe weather, like a hurricane or an earthquake or something, that really the underlying laws of a country, the fundamental laws of a country, become less important, and it's more about survival and helping other people, and that's so things change in those circumstances. So yes, I would say there are cases you can break the law. Next one, and the last one today. How can governments ensure that laws are fair for everyone? Wow, that's a really hard question. I think when governments are creating new legislation, of course, they must consider all areas of society, regardless or depending on income, the different demographics. It's very important that they consider all types of people. An example that comes to my mind is handicapped people, that perhaps when laws, rules, different things. I'll give you an example. In the Seoul underground system, so the subway, they call it here, they had rules in the past where you could push people to get them onto the subway and really squeeze people onto the subway. But of course, this kind of rule makes it really difficult for handicapped people to use the subway system. They can't go through that same process of being pushed and squeezed by people. So that's a case, and by the way, it's changed now, but that's a case where we need to be more open to all areas of society with the rules and laws that are created. That was hard. I had no idea where I was going to go with that. I think I kind of freestyled and found my way. But in the end, again, and we talk about this a lot, but bringing it into my own area, so in this case, my home city, Seoul, and thinking about the subway system, that saved me. That gave me something to talk about. So always, as soon as you see a question, you think, oh no, this is going to be a nightmare, try to bring it into your own world. Great. That's everything for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Tough one. It must be easier. Let's see. Yeah, next week, we're going to talk about manners. That is easier because, of course, in England, manners are so important, and you know the expression from King's Men, manners maketh man. So hopefully I'll have a lot to talk about on that subject. So study really, 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 really hard this week, and I will join you next week to talk about manners. Have a good week, and see you then.